Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Open Mic Comedy Podcast. I'm your host, Mark. If this is your first time here, welcome. If you're a returning listener, welcome back. This podcast is here for everybody on the open mic comedy circuit, whether you're a comedian, an MC, a promoter, or a tutor. Hey, even comedy fans who enjoy watching the stars of the future in pub basements. If you're thinking I could do that, then this podcast will guide you on what to expect on this crazy circuit, from those right in the middle of it. Today's guest is someone who's a published author. He's a current cricket umpire, so it's time to be bowled over. After he slips a joke in down your gully, you're sure to be creasing up with a Lara laughs and won't be gowering in the corner. We'll also find out if he's been caught with a sticky wicket on stage. He's also a fan of fish and chips in the Middle East and knows exactly where and how his kids were conceived. Please welcome to the stage the pun man extraordinaire, Mr. Mark Rivlin.
Thank you. Thank you. I suppose your favourite film is The Third Man.
I had to give it. I always love to give everybody a little introduction, and I had to do something on that.
You might have to pad it out a bit.
Yeah. Here we go.
Sorry.
Everybody, this is what it's going to be like for the next hour or so. Because Mark Rivlin, if you've not seen him, is a pun extraordinaire. I would class you as.
That was very kind, thank you.
But let's go back then. So, how are you, first of all?
Yeah, I mean, for someone aged 68, I'm not too bad. And tomorrow, of course, will be the second time in 5 years that I get an election. Sorry.
Mm.
Yeah.
Oh dear! It's going to be one of them.
You know, I know how they count the votes.
Yeah.
But can't say too much because that would be telling.
So come on, how did you and comedy get involved? How long's it been going? Give us some background to it all.
Right. Well, it's an extraordinary story, which I don't think you or your listeners will. Basically, it started at the age of 10 or 11 when my brother Michael, who's now just turned 80, bless him, he left me when he left home. He left me his Dansette record player and a vinyl record, as they were then, on top with the best of British comedy. And I listened to that and I was smitten.
Okay.
And I started to collect vinyl albums of comedy. It's very hard growing up in Leeds to find something like that. So I would come down and see my uncle and aunt in London and go to HMV, and of course they had everything. But I really got into it all with Tony Hancock, Round the Horn, Peter Cook and Dudley Moore. I mean, icons of comedy, Bob Monkhouse. And I really enjoyed it. And when I got to about the age of 25, it was when the Comedy Store and the new wave of comedy was just starting up. And I had a go. So it was about 1980. And Alexis Sale was the MC. And it was a gong night, as they all were then in those days. I had to have an interview midweek to see if I was good enough. And then I got on stage, did 2 jokes, and I was gonged off. And the next time I appeared on a stage was 36 years later.
Wow.
And a lot, and it wasn't because of that humiliation necessarily, but I really understood how to write jokes when I worked Saturday nights on the Sunday People newspaper on the sports desk. So there, I did it for about 17 years. So there you have a lot of very good editors and people who know the game. And basically, when you've done the stuff about who scored which goal when, etc., and the marks for each player, then you have to come up with a pun headline.
Yeah.
And it's ruthless. You've got a guy standing behind you. Come on, get on with it. Effing this, effing that. And that's how I built up basically the knowledge of how to write jokes. So I'll give you a couple of examples. Stuart Houston, former Manchester United player, he then became the manager of Queen's Park Rangers. They lost 4-0 at home. Headline, Houston, we have a problem. So, and there were hundreds, if not thousands of these headlines. I think the best one I ever heard was my dear friend Andy Cooper.
I'm going to see if you're going to say the same one as I've just written down on a piece of paper. I think we might
Okay.
be.
Well, I think that the one I'm going to tell you, I think, is just if that was in on a comedy circuit at a football night, it would get just roars of laughter. Andy Cooper went on to big things in the industry, and he came up with this joke about Dimitri Karin, who was the Chelsea goalkeeper in the early 2000s.
Okay.
Moscow, whatever. And he saved a penalty in the last minute. And Andy's headline was "From Russia with Glove."
That's not the one I was thinking of.
Okay, go on. Thank you.
Mine was from, I remember this from, I don't know if it must have been, probably in the 90s, might have been early 2000s. I'm not entirely sure. But it was, I think, Caledonian Thistle had beaten Celtic. And the headline was "Super Cali are ecstatic, Celtic are atrocious."
Yeah, that's world famous. I mean, you've got to have a real brain to be able to come up with something like that. I remember when it's one of the Kidderminster Harriers got to like the 5th round of the cup or something like that.
Yeah,
and so I came up with Yes Minster with what they used to call the dogs, DICK, which is an exclamation mark.
Yeah.
It was great fun, and I learned basically how to write jokes. And one of my mates, as I left, he said, just get on the comedy circuit, do one-line jokes, but just don't do them about football. And 8 years later, 250 gigs, I've got about 1,500 jokes.
Yeah, I was going to ask. So you then got back into it then. So would you say it was around about 2016?
Yeah, exactly. 2016 July. Yeah.
So just making that leap again to go and give it a try again. Did you ever look back at what happened 30 odd years before and go, I'm not sure I want to do this? Or it was a case of no, just...
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I wasn't sure I should be doing it when I was younger. But now, having had 2016, having had all that experience at the Sunday People writing these jokes, headlines, I realised I could have a go at it, and I was lucky because I went for my first gig to the Lion's Den, and I think it's a great place. That, even though I came out of the hat last, so I was headlining in a way my first gig, and I've got a video of it, and it went really well. So I thought, crikey, I'm in here. And then, of course, you get to realise what it's really about, the comedy circuit. And I've had some terrible nights. I mean, really awful. And you just got to put up with it. It's a meritocracy, the audience, like a jury. They're entitled to have a herd immunity feel. If that's what they want and they don't like me, I think that's great. That's fine. You just got to put up with it.
Yeah, it's every audience is different, but I also think that every bad gig can teach you something as well.
Yeah, very much.
If there's something you can take away from a bad gig, no matter how small it is or whatever.
Well, at the beginning, it was very hard because I didn't know how to remember the jokes, and I had cue cards with one word on, which is very unprofessional. But eventually, I built up enough of a reserve of jokes, plenty of jokes. And then I realised, the way to do it was to go on stage confidently.
Because that's one of the things I've said it before on this podcast is that I've had a lot of admiration for people like yourself who write jokes that are very short, very snappy, compared to somebody like myself that kind of has a story and everything has a section. So for me, it makes it easier to remember because I know the story, because there's always that element of truth. So it goes from one to another to another. So how do you work that with the jokes that you do, the shorter version? Do you try and work out a way that can link them together? Or is it just a case of, this one comes after this and they may not be related in any way?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. What I try to do is read the audience before I go on stage, because it's rare that I go on first. And I kind of try and tailor the material to what I think the audience are going to like. But I do take your point because, like I had a joke. I set myself a task once when it lockdown, and you could have all the jokes in front of you. It was much easier on the gigs. I did a lot of gigs during lockdown. And I thought to myself, you know what? Think of something and think how many puns you can put together, one after the other, about that subject. So I came up with ironing from nowhere. And then I thought, right, okay, you're going to crease yourselves. You must be starch raving mad. They're all off the cuff.
Yeah.
I'm held in high esteem. I wrote them all when I lived in Hanger Lane, and on and on and on. And those kind of what I call compilation jokes are great. You can get a few laughs for nothing.
So have you always been this type of joke, would you say? This kind of format?
I do puns, I do one-liners. Sometimes I do a tiny little story, like the joke about Banged Up Abroad. I give that a minute's worth. The series Banged Up Abroad, and I like doing the gigs that Carl Wallace puts on, the promoter, Beyond the Comfort Zone.
Yeah.
And I think those are really good because you're tested. So I did a 5 minutes best man speech, which went very well.
Okay.
It's a different kind of comedy. So I think it's good to test yourself.
Yeah, no, I've wanted to get on one of them for a little while, to do something a little bit different from what I'm used to, and see if something can work in what you'd consider a safe environment. I guess on those type of nights, you want to go prepared with something, but everybody in the audience knows that something could go wrong.
Yes, of course.
And you've got that little bit of leeway to go, okay, yeah, this isn't working, or you work out something does have legs and something you can run with as such. There's a couple of puns in there for you.
Well, I was gutted not to make the high jump team at university. I've never got over it.
So can you remember the very first joke you ever told, whether it was as a child or as an adult?
Yeah, I mean, the first, funnily enough, I can remember. We went to visit cousins. I think it was I must have been about 10 at the time, and it was in Cambridgeshire, and there was a sign that said Puckeridge.
Yep.
And I said to my dad, I think there's a spelling mistake there. And my mother went mad. You weren't brought up like that. Well, clearly I was.
Your dad's thinking, that's a good one, son. That's a good one. Not making it known. What about do you remember the time then your first gig, you said, where it was a gong show? Can you remember the first couple of jokes?
Well, I can remember there were 2 jokes I did, and it's extraordinary this, because I can remember one, but I can't remember the other one. And in those days, the comedy club, when it started out, sort of late 70s, it was in the Nell Gwyn Strip Club in Soho.
Okay.
And my first joke was, I wasn't really expecting to get too much applause in the Nell Gwyn Strip Club, because it's difficult to clap with one hand. And unfortunately, it just didn't land. And I realised then that I was in trouble. And a few seconds later, that was it. The noose was round my neck.
Yeah. Do you think that was because of the joke, or do you reckon it was a performance or nerves? Or
I think it was simply, again, it's a case of some audiences like that kind of thing, some don't. Fine. That's how it goes.
Yeah.
Or went.
So when you've got back into comedy then in 2016, how did you? Was it a case of just, I'm going to try one gig and then that was it, or was it I've got a plan that I want to achieve something in the future, or was it just, I don't know?
I didn't have a plan because I was terrified that I was going to bomb. But as I said, the gig itself went very well. I must have done about 6-7 minutes. Obviously, not every joke landed, but a few of them did.
Yeah.
Like, my grandfather was really good at spelling, so he became a hangman. And I did a few jokes about, got to learn the ropes, this kind of thing.
Yeah.
I thought I had decent material, and it went well. But as we all know, comedy is not just about the material, it's about how you present it and who your persona is on stage. It took me a long, long time to work that out.
So that's changed a lot then over the years.
Yes, I've tried many different ways of delivering these jokes, and I found it very useful not to take the mic out of the holster, as Peter Kay would say, and just stand there. That went well. I now have a more frenetic approach, that I'm completely addicted to these jokes and I can't stop myself. It's like a fever, and that seems to go down well. But you're only as good as your next gig.
Yeah.
It's like any sport or anything like that. If you don't perform well, it's your own fault.
Yeah. Yeah, I have noticed that you're one of the very few acts that does leave the mic in the stand and works his way around the mic rather than.
Yeah,
So I
now I
guess
kind of sometimes do take it out. It depends how I feel. I will tell you one thing though, which I think was a really interesting wake up call. I've done the last 2 years, and I'm going to do it this year. I've done some compilation 5 minute sets in Edinburgh. Just
hmm
stayed there for 3 or 4 nights. And the first time I did this, it's with Massai Graham's one liner show. Massai Graham, of course, is an icon of British
hmm
comedy. How it's taken him 20 years to get an agent and to be, recognized, it is simply beyond belief, because
yeah,
he is a genius, a comedy genius, and he's born to make people laugh. And I love the guy to bits. First of all, he's a great guy as well. Um, and I did a gag. I did a few gigs there, 2 a day. I think he does 5 a day with these
yeah,
one-liners, the dirty ones, the clean ones. Anyway, I had this gag. I met my wife in a slaughterhouse. She was a stunner, and someone had. And it's a joke that I made up.
yeah,
And then I'm not going to mention his name. He's a fantastic comedian. He came up, did a set with a similar joke, and then he accused me of taking his joke. Now,
yeah,
it's nonsense. I mean, when you're in this kind of game that we're in, which is puns and one-liners, there's bound to be parallel thinking.
yeah,
It's impossible not to, because everyone's thinking the same way. If you look at all the great guys, I don't mean the famous ones like Stuart Francis and Gary Delaney and Tim Vine and Milton Jones. I'm talking about, people like Daniel Edison, wonderful wordsmith.
hmm
And there's some great people on the circuit who do one-line jokes. A lovely guy in Wales, Kyle Davis, absolutely brilliant. So it's inevitable it's going to happen.
yeah,
And the way I work is this: I do not look on Google to see if my joke has already been there. I don't do that because, first of all, at 60 odd years old, I don't need to do that.
yeah,
I think up the joke and I go with it. If somebody else has written it before me, I don't care.
yeah,
I would never steal anybody else's jokes. I have told other people's jokes
yeah,
over the years with their permission. I'm going to tell you one now. I think one of the best guys on the circuit, he very rarely gigs, is Tom Murphy, an Aussie guy. And he's got two jokes I think are just genius. Unfortunately, he doesn't gig enough for me
yeah.
to hear them. But the first one is sad news. My mother-in-law was eaten by a great white shark. I gave it the term great. Um, uh, it's a brilliant joke. But the next one's just like sublime. And he said it's one of the first jokes he ever wrote, and he'll never write anything better. He said, growing up in Western Australia, in Perth, he said, my father always used to say, get in there first, son. So at the age of 9, I abused my uncle. And I say who the name is, and I've got permission to tell you this joke. And
Yeah,
that's fine. I love to see people who do one-liners. There's a youngster now, you probably know him, Declan Evans.
yeah,
He's brilliant. He's got fantastic jokes. And, it's a pleasure to be on stage with someone like that.
yeah. Declan is he's kind of that. I haven't seen him for a little while, but I kind of class him as like a half and half. He has a
Mm-hmm.
story behind everything, but everything
Yeah.
is very punchy and very one-linery and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it fits together like a nice. You don't realize you're kind of listening to pun-based jokes a lot of the time.
You don't listen, what, sorry?
You don't. It doesn't feel like you're listening to a pun-based joke
No,
one after the other.
you're right. He's more of a stand-up comic than a punster or one-liner,
Yeah,
because his intros are much longer than one line. But he's great. I think he's destined for glory, that lad. And there's a new lad called Rex Yard, and I think he's going to be huge.
yeah.
A terrific jokester.
Yeah, I think I'm not familiar with Rex, but yeah, Declan I think has got a hell of a future somewhere.
Yeah,
I really do. I think he's that good. It's just I don't know what he needs to get to the next stage, but he's I think he's on the way there. I
yeah,
keep seeing like he's in this industry. When you see your face on a poster or something for an open mic night, it's great. But it's then when you see your face on a poster for a comedy night, which has a price at the bottom, that's kind of that next level up. And I think he's starting to creep into that level now. He's going to be on here one day soon.
Great.
He's going to be on here. We've been speaking for ages. We just need to tie up the times. But yeah, Declan is ever since I saw him, I think he's one of the nicest guys out there as well.
Yeah, he's a great kid. Yeah, and his father's great as well. His father's helping him a lot.
Yeah, definitely. So you touched on it earlier with regards to obviously the Gong Show. The first one didn't go very well. The first ever gig. Is that the worst moment you've had on stage, or has there been others?
Yeah, I remember one very early on, maybe a few months into doing comedy, and it was a Sunday night gig somewhere off Tottenham Court Road in a pub.
Okay.
And I went in there and I just bombed. I mean, there was simply no reaction from the audience. There was a fairly big crowd, and I take these things in my stride. And I said, look, I was born in Leeds. I've died here. I'm going, and that's it. And I think it's better to do that than struggle on.
Yeah.
I hate seeing people struggling. And then 5 days later, I was at it's a very nice, well, there used to be a very nice gig near where the new American embassy is, Vauxhall Way.
Okay.
Towards Battersea was a pub, the Princess or something like that. And I did a few gigs there over the years. And it was just 5 days after I'd had that terrible Sunday night, and it went brilliantly. So go figure.
Yeah. So it was just a case of no reactions whatsoever on stage and feeling like, this isn't working. I need to kind of get off of here now. And I'm going to put you out of your misery and me out of my misery.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I didn't feel bad. I didn't think, this is the end of it, because I'd already done some gigs. I did think it's going to be, the future's going to be difficult, but it turned out that it wasn't difficult. Doing badly at a gig and bombing, as they call it, I don't think it's such a bad thing. It wakes you up.
Yeah.
Why has it happened? Don't blame the audience. Blame yourself.
Yeah, I think if you, like I say, I think you need those bombs to help you improve. If you keep going through and you keep thinking, oh, that was okay, you're kind of flatlining.
Yeah,
you're on that same level, and you're not being pushed to the next level. You're in that comfort zone with, oh, I know this joke works, I know this works, rather than pushing yourself to something that may not work, but you may realize, okay, like we said before, that has the ability to be something better than what you've done, but it's not there yet.
Yes, I think there's an issue of entitlement amongst comedians, myself included. You write a joke, you think, oh, it's a great joke, it's great, it's going to be great, and it just falls flat. Okay, I mean, that's life, and it's actually probably a good idea to get rid of it.
The one thing I've kind of come to understand is that when you've got two different comedians like we are, one me being a storyteller, you being puns, it's probably easier, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, for you to get rid of a joke than it is for me, because my joke's probably within 2 minutes worth of material, whereas yours is within 20 seconds.
Yeah.
So you can dump that 20 seconds and bring in another 20.
Yeah.
Whereas if ultimately the joke that I've got that rounds off this 2 minutes is crap and doesn't work, you could potentially junk in 2 minutes of material that you've created, in which case it's then harder to find the next lot.
Yeah, I agree. But what I do think is, and I respect very much people who do these jokes like the ones you do. They've got some kind of story to tell. And I love those jokes. But if you play around with the story as the setup, you might find a different thing will happen at the end. You really never know. But yes, it is much easier for me because I just can go and see what's next on the conveyor belt.
That's the thing is I don't want this to come across as two different styles and one's better than the other, because I've even said before in a previous episode that I would love to be able to do the type of jokes that you guys do. I'd love to. That's the one. That's kind of like the goal that I'd love to get to one day, to try out and do. But I know that my brain's not there to remember every joke. And that's where I would struggle. And my fear is that I do it in my normal set, is that if I get to a point and I've just suddenly lost my train of thought and lost my thing, I can make up something about, oh, I'm always so forgetful, and gives my brain time to catch up and get back to where it was. So it doesn't look too obvious. But when I think you're doing the puns, it's like once you've stopped, you're like, you literally freeze in my head.
When I'm telling a joke, I'm already thinking, what is the next one up on the line?
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but there's always a backup.
Yeah. That's a huge skill to have, and I admire it from afar. I love your type of comedy. I really do, because
That's great. Thank you.
So simple, but it's
it's simple. In fact, it's a pretty obvious kind of dynamic. This what we're supposed to do is make people laugh. Fine. Whether the jokes are good or not is less important than whether the reaction.
Yeah,
because you can see people laughing when they shouldn't be.
Yeah, and sometimes you get people that when you tell certain jokes, they'll groan on stuff like that, and sometimes the groan is as fulfilling as the laughter.
Yeah, I love the groans. Yeah, I don't get many groans at my age, but yeah.
I do it in my set where a friend of mine came to see me for the very first time, and I ended on a particular joke that was a little bit vulgar, but then it takes on the next bit after, takes on the next. It takes the vulgarity and like multiplies it by 10. And he said that bit before the very last joke, he said, you got a really good laugh on that one. He said, but the second one, you got a really big groan. I'm not sure you wanted that. I'm like, no, that's what I wanted. Yeah. I wanted the groan.
Yes.
Because it's so, the premise of it was it needed a groan. It doesn't need a huge amount of laughter, because it then the audience go through the journey of this bit of laughter, ha ha ha, and then
Yeah.
And I think that ties in nicely, and it makes the audience then remember that it's not all the same.
Yes, and what's good about the circuit, the open mic circuit, is there's always a wide range of different types of comedy.
Yeah,
which is great, because if you've seen Jimbo in action, bless him, he's now turned 80. He's he does basically Harold Lloyd and Buster Keaton. He can play around with the microphone for 5 minutes as a set. It's incredible skill.
Yeah. So we touched on the worst moment on stage. Can you remember what's your most favourite or memorable moment that you've had where you've just gone, that was just can it get better?
Yeah, twice I've beaten the gong at up the creek, and the point there is you're sitting in front of 150, 200 people, so it's a big thing, and I think you're doing well, because it seems to me that in that crowd, if people like you, you'll never get gonged off, or whatever the word is. But yeah, I mean that was a great night. But I've also had good nights where there's been like 8 people there.
Yeah.
So I think when you've done a good or a bad set.
Yeah, yeah. How do you find it when you're performing in front of, say, a crowd of 20 to a crowd of 200?
It's more difficult in front of 20 because it's like you're disappointed there's not more people watching. With 200. You think, God, this is it. It's not going to get any bigger than that for me. So make the most of it. And I recognise it's a good idea. I haven't done this, but I will. But friends of mine have done it. Living down in London, they go up and do Beat the Frog in Manchester, and then go over to Hot Water in Liverpool, which are 2 very famous clubs. And you'll be tested up there. So I've really fancied doing that.
What about the Red Raw in Newcastle and Edinburgh?
Well, the thing about Edinburgh, which is fantastic, which is why I go, is because Masai Graham's venue is incredible. Dropkick Murphys, he can get 150 people in there. Huge pub.
Yeah.
If you want to be where the action is, you need to go to Edinburgh and jump on a few sets. For people who take their own show there, and I'm kind of half thinking about an idea I've come up with for next year, I might do it, but it's a financial risk.
Yeah, I don't know what all the costs are involved, but I know I've just said it 100 times before, is the primary thing I've always had with Edinburgh is just the sheer and utter cost of it.
Yeah,
in terms of accommodation,
come to $10,000 quite easily.
Yeah, the accommodation costs are just unbelievable.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but I look at people that go to Edinburgh, and I know quite a few that are going this year or they're there, and it's like you're thinking you're staying in a single bed in the student halls just to make it viable. And I don't know about you, but I feel too old for that. It's just like,
yes.
I need a hotel room or something, or a house I can live in whilst I'm there. Not do student, as much as I'd love to do it and stuff. It's just when you think people are doing like student accommodation, they're paying £50 a night just for that. You're like, okay, and like, you're there for 25, 30 days. That's sizable. Everything else in Edinburgh I found is kind of bizarrely reasonably well priced, but I don't know if that's because we're coming from like the London area. So if you get asked for £4-5 for a drink in Edinburgh, you're like, that's cheap because you're used to paying 6, 7, 8 plus in London. I always found like even just going out and the food stuff was always seemed fairly reasonable. I don't know if it's just down to the amount of competition there is there, but it was just that accommodation. But then I've got no idea how much it costs to get a venue and stuff like that.
Well, it's not just the venue, but it's the accommodation, as you say, and then you've still got your accommodation to pay for in London.
Yeah.
And then if you're looking at a bit of PR and all the rest of it, then you can imagine. But it's become the fact that TikTok are one of the sponsors tells you everything you need to know.
Oh, okay, I didn't realise that. But I guess because one thing I did want to bring up is that something that you've started doing recently, which I guess is very good preparation work for Edinburgh, is that you've started now going down using Instagram a lot more. Because before there wasn't a lot, but now there's little clips that are dropping every so often. And I guess that in a way that's kind of laying the foundation for you to promote for the future, whether it's next year or whenever.
Yeah, and it's thanks to Jack Hennison again, who's like a wonderful guy. And what he's done is he's taken some of my videos and he's ripped them into reels.
Yeah.
A few jokes. And one of them, I'll tell you the joke now. I'm opening up a fish and chip shop in Brunei. I'm going to call it Salt and Vinegar. Now, that joke has had 628,000 views.
Yes.
I mean,
that's extraordinary.
It is for a joke like that. Yeah.
It's a mystery sometimes to me how what I'm going to say may sound, it's not meant to sound disrespectful, how some things get so many views, and not because of what they are, how an account like yours, which has a few hundred followers, something like that, I'm guessing.
Something like that.
Generates a clip that goes to 600,000 plus people have seen that clip. And I know why it works. It's because it's short, it's sweet, and it's consumable. Because how many times when somebody's on the phone, they're looking through something. The clip must be, I'm trying a number out here, maybe about 12 seconds long.
Yeah.
And it's probably about the right amount of attention span that somebody's got whilst they're scrolling. And the fact that you've got the subtitles on there means it's completely, somebody will stop and read those subtitles because they're on the screen. It's said these days that most stuff on Instagram is consumed with the volume off. So if you don't put subtitles on, people are just going to go on to the next one. But that you've got it going well here. And hopefully that then translates into followers and then stuff like that. Because I've seen some people, the guy that actually taught me comedy, he's got 500 views. He's been an established comic for years, but he's got one clip from being at Big Belly when he was an MC. And I think that's in millions upon millions of views.
Wow, that's great.
And you're like, how does that not? One thing you want that to do is translate that number into followers and then grow your audience so that when you do the next one, it starts getting bigger and bigger.
And I'm going to continue doing these jokes. I don't really care if there's a background of laughter or not. I can just do them myself.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I've learned about Instagram.
That's what we all have to do. It's where it's all consumed these days.
In the care home, they call it Instagram.
I'm trying to think of a comeback, but I've got nothing.
Yeah, well,
I'm not quick enough. So, with your jokes themselves, this is such a simple question, but how do you create them?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and for me, it's very simple. I do not sit down with an empty notepad. I just let the jokes come to me. You can be, I mean, like the other day, I was listening to LBC. Occasionally, I listen to LBC, and James O'Brien has got this catchphrase when somebody calls in, says, "What made you pick up the phone?" And immediately, I have a joke because I dropped it. I mean, and so I wait for the things to come. I was not driving, on the bus down Essex Road in North London. This was a few years ago. The bus stopped, and over the road there was a nail bar, and
Yeah.
the name of it was Stasi, Stasi. I mean, you couldn't make that up. It's a perfect storm. And then, like a few months ago, I'm walking past the dry cleaners. I must have passed that dry cleaners near where we live. I must have passed it 5,000 times over the years.
Yeah.
And then suddenly I stopped and thought, I've got myself a joke. It took a bit of time to get the setup right. And the
Yeah.
joke is, I've stopped taking my suit to the dry cleaners because the alcoholic cleaner cleans it better. The jokes come to me like that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I was in another one a few years ago. I was in a chip shop. And the guy said, "Would you like peas?" I said, "Yes." And then I came out and realised I got a joke. I got an oral infection eating the wife's vegetables, her peas.
Yeah.
So this is how it happens for me now. Some people I know who are one-liners look through synonyms and other words that sound like other words, and they then build, which is fine, whichever way is good for you. But I just wait for the jokes to come to me, and for some reason they always do. Like I was at the Royal College of Anaesthetists building, walked past it, and I stopped, and I realised there was a joke there.
Yeah.
My sister's daughter's one of those doctors that puts you to sleep before an operation, so I've got anaesthetist. And so, all the time I'm on the lookout for jokes, and it's as simple as that.
So do you then consciously then try to do the toppers for them, or because like you mentioned with the ironing one, you went through like 3, 4, 5, 6 after that, but all related to the same topic? Do you get like the chip shop one? You've got the herpes. Do you then go, okay, am I gonna leave that there, or do I start trying to look for something else to build upon it?
Yeah, if I think it's one that could be a series of jokes, I definitely, like we've got a French electrician, he's called Serge.
I love
was
that.
in the Resistance. And then I go on to other, like we've got a travel agent from Romania, very good if you want to book a rest. And then I go on with other, kind of work people or whatever you want to call it. We've got a Swedish courier. He's okay, but if you're not in, he takes the stock home. It can go on forever. so that's.
Sorry, Bucharest just got me. That was brilliant. That's just sheer and utter brilliant. How does that one come about?
Don't know. I mean, it's really about in America, the comedians who do one-liners, they call themselves wordsmiths. And there's a woman who I gigged with online at like 3 a.m. here when the gig was in New York, Rachel Rothenberg in New York City. And she's got this brilliant joke, which is perfect play on words, which is, I like to have a book when I go to the bathroom, meaning toilet. And I've been reading about Velvet Underground. That's a Lou Reed. That's a great joke. It's really clever. That's how interestingly, in America, it's not really used that much in comedy, but it's a big thing, wordplay.
Yeah.
Fine. That's. I mean, I've got this one. My favourite wordplay joke probably is I saw a great film last week on Netflix, The Love Life of Napoleon. It was very good, especially the Bonaparte, and he's just got to pick up the vibe of there's so many names and situations and places you can, like Nantucket. I mean, that's just perfect, isn't it? In America.
So that was going to be my next question. I think you've answered it. Is what's your favourite joke? Maybe not your best joke, and how did it come about, and has it changed?
I think my best joke is not a pun. It's a one-liner, and it's an absurdity, and an absurdity is part and parcel of comedy. The wife said, "Why don't you grow a beard?" I said, "We don't have to do everything together," and that's. all it is a joke that makes people laugh.
Yeah.
Apart from my wife, but yeah.
Has that has always changed? It's always stayed that joke has just been that line and never been adjusted, or have you played with it?
No, not that joke always comes as it is.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's an issue of what you can and can't do jokes on, and particularly with one-liners, it's quite tempting to do jokes. But I stay clear of that. Occasionally, when Carl Wallace puts on a Dark Delights night, there might be one or two which are kind of on the borderline. But I think the what I like about the open mic circuit is that we can police it ourselves. We know when we can't go down one alley. Definitely, it's not like the comedians in the 1970s, many of whom I saw live, were just throwing out outrageous jokes.
Yeah.
I'm glad those days are gone.
Yeah, I think we all have this thing now where you gauge from the audience how if you've overstepped the mark a bit or not. I've seen people do great, amazing sets, and then for some reason I've never understood why. They've always gone, "Oh, I've got a bit more time left. I need to fill that time," and that inevitably somebody, especially if they're younger, will throw out a line like, "Oh, does anybody want to hear a really dark joke?" And then the audience are like, "Well, we're here now. We might as well." So they tell it. And then it doesn't land. And then that person's set, the only thing you remember of it is that last bit and not the first 4 minutes that had everybody in raptures of laughter. And they've just, because they've turned the tables at that very end, they've kind of ruined what they've just done. But hopefully that person has then looked at that joke and gone, I'm not doing that again. They've learned that lesson as such. And it's that room was, if you've got a room in raptures for what you've done first time and then you flip the tables on them at the end and it doesn't go well, if you're next in another room and your first bit's not going well, maybe the last bit will work, but those two bits are not supposed to go together. They don't fit. They don't feel believable.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, I agree with that. I had an interesting reaction to a joke, which I don't think is in any way insulting at all. The joke is, I went out clubbing last night. I'll tell you what, those seals put up a good fight. And some animal rights, someone from the animal rights movement complained afterwards.
Yeah.
And I said, look, I take your point, okay, but it's a joke. It's like what Scott Caparo says. It's words. It's a joke.
Yeah.
It's not particular. I mean, I would not stop telling that joke.
Yeah, it's amazing what some people would find a little bit offensive and stuff. Because there's an incident with a previous guest on here who's started doing a routine. Was talking about being the victim, or his father was victim of racism, or he was victim of racism, or something like that. And some guy in the crowd basically got up and said, "I've had enough of you telling us that we're all racist and stuff like this." And my mate was just like, "I don't understand what you're going on about." And the guy walked out, and then he saw him after, and he just asked him, "Explain what you mean when you think this is being racist." He said, "You're basically criticizing other people, and you're doing all of this." And he said, "But that's something that's happened to me. If I want to tell that joke, but if I do it in an Irish accent or another accent, is that more acceptable?" And the guy was like, "Oh, I kind of see your point now. What I've interpreted what you're doing is not what you're doing." And that person may have laughed if he'd made out that the person being racist was, say, an Irishman, for example, and put on an Irish voice rather than a Londoner, which this guy was. And I thought that was quite interesting that the joke was still the joke, but the person that took offense was because they somehow related it to themselves in a weird kind of way. Just like, a joke is a joke. If you'd laugh at it, if you changed the scenario of a type of person that it involved and you still laugh, then the joke still works. I've been quite lucky in that I don't think I've had anybody come up to me and say, "You've really offended me with that," other than my daughters who don't like the punchline of my main joke.
Right. And I'm very happy. It's the same with the cricket umpiring. On the pitch, I don't want anyone to be telling me I hit the ball, I didn't hit the ball, blah, blah, blah. But in the bar after the match, I'm very happy to hear anything they've got to say. And similarly, if someone comes to me and says, "I don't like your joke," fine. It's cool. I don't mind.
Yeah.
It's fine.
It's always interesting though when somebody likes to go out your way to say, I did not like what you did. Okay. What do you want me to do about it?
It does happen. That's how it is.
So you kind of touched on the cricket there. You are currently a umpire, and you've written a book.
Recreational cricket umpire.
Yeah.
Not first class. And I do the Hertfordshire League. I'm umpire, and I do the second tier. I'm not qualified high enough to do the Premiership. I mean, in the Hearts League, there's 28 divisions, and the panel of umpires covers the top 5 divisions, and I do Division 1, which is like the second, third tier, and Division 2. And I love it. And I've published a book about it, self-published, called Secret Umps. I'll give you Secret Umps.
So what's the theme of the book then?
Well,
obviously it's cricket, but
I've written it anonymously because I didn't want the players and officials to think I've given someone out, so I've got a chapter for the book. A lot of people know it's me. And what I've tried to do in this book is kind of show the dynamics of league recreational cricket and how important it is to the people who play it, particularly, and how umpires have missed a trick by not understanding that they are our clients. In other words, they pay us to do the job. Not that much, but they pay us.
Yeah.
So I think, the players deserve the best kind of umpiring. And so sometimes people are very upset by decisions. It's inevitable.
Yeah.
But I've got a stock phrase. Aleem Dar, the great Pakistani umpire who retired recently, was the best umpire in the world. I said, if you want Aleem Dar, it's $5,000. You get me for half a tank of petrol. And I mean, I did actually only once, and never again. I actually made a joke on the pitch, and I've written about it in the book, and it was a very cheeky and wrong thing to say, and I regret saying it. But I gave somebody out in a game, LBW, and he wasn't best pleased. And as he walked past me, he said, "I hit it, umps." And I said, and I shouldn't have said, I said, the local paper on Friday, Sonny, and you'll see that you didn't hit it. A good idea.
So what made you decide to create the book?
It was the 2020 truncated season where there were hardly any games and it was miserable, as you can imagine, with COVID-19. And it kind of got me thinking about what is cricket, recreational cricket, all about. Everyone knows the superstars and the Ashes and T20 and all that. But league cricket is a fantastic British institution. And the whole thing is wonderful. And it's been going for nearly 300 years. And I think it's a real privilege to be officiating. But I wrote the book because I want more people to come into umpiring because we are chronically short of umpires up and down the country. And the reason for that is twofold. You get to a certain age, you don't want to do it anymore. And, there's quite a bit of lip, as you can imagine. Sometimes it's just not very pleasant, but I stick at it. I like it.
I can imagine it's with, I don't know if, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's like the football thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Where they want to encourage more referees to come through, but the players just don't make that feel possible. I've got a friend of mine who said his 12-year-old is thinking about like doing the training to become a referee and doing all the courses and stuff. And you're kind of like, that's brave. I don't think I could do it. My dad was a referee when he was alive, it was kind of like almost up to county level, but
oh wow, that's pretty high.
Kind of.
Wow.
But my most stark memory of whenever he was refereeing, and my dad was a big fella, so there was always that people wouldn't generally mess with him as such. If he said it how it was, that was kind of how it was. You get some people that try, but my dad was like 6'2", quite wide but quite fit. But my stark memory of him was every Sunday afternoon was filling in the FA reports that he had to send off about the games. And every so often, he would be there with a police report to fill in as well.
Good grief.
Yeah.
Wow.
In it always seemed to happen between whenever you have like teams of nationalities. So if you had a team that was like primarily Italians, primarily Greeks, primarily English, whenever they went against each other, all hell would break loose. And it wouldn't just happen in the game. It'd be like witness reports you'd have to do where somebody's basically been thrown through a car windscreen. And you're just like, is this worth it? You're doing this for whatever. Back then, it was like 15 quid a game, if that, maybe even tenner a game. Because this was like, I don't know, 30 years ago, 30 years ago. And you're thinking, you could get seriously hurt here.
Yeah.
In the crossfire, or you could be the victim of somebody doesn't like your decision. You know, you see the reports and the thing, they write down the phrases that are told to them by the players. And you're just like, come on. Without this guy in the black, there ain't no game.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just, it makes me just wonder what goes through somebody's mind. You know, it's almost like take the ball away, isn't it? I remember seeing he must have been 17 years old, because when I used to go and watch my dad do the occasional game, and you're in those like Hackney Marshes or wherever, he's got like 6 or 7 pitches all around you, and you're watching other games. And also, I remember seeing one kid, must have been 17 years old. He picked the ball up and went, game's off. You're not respecting anything I'm doing, so there's no game anymore, and just walked away. He said, I can't take this abuse. He's literally being hurled abuse, threatening behaviour. And he just went, no, done. I'm reporting you all to the FA, and whatever happens, happens. It's not worth it. And you kind of think, you almost need more of that sometimes for people to understand. It's like when you see racist abuse and stuff in football stadiums. You almost need to just, if you don't do anything about it, it's not going to change.
Yeah, that's
Something
true.
has to stop. And if that stop is, all right, the game's off, done. That's what it takes. But yeah, I don't know how, do cricket get as much abuse as football? I don't know.
It's
or is it a bit more snide?
Because it's 90 minutes football, and a cricket match can be 6-7 hours.
Yeah.
And generally the behaviour is okay. I mean, in all the 15 years I've been umpiring, I've only filed 2 reports.
Okay.
About behaviour, so that's pretty good. But I've got a very wide berth. I mean, if a bowler has a catch dropped at slip and goes, oh, effing hell, right? Yeah. Apparently, if that loud voice reaches the pavilion, you're supposed to give them a level 1. But for goodness sake, I mean, he's having a go at his own, his own player.
But no, I get that. So, quick one then. What do you prefer, Test or 2020? The shorter format?
Test match. I've written a chapter in the book about 2020, and it's okay to watch for a bit, but I'll never umpire that again after doing one game. It's impossible.
So do you think it's one of those games that's not true in keeping with the spirit of what cricket actually is?
No, I like the idea of it, T20. And by the way, I think it's really good that women's cricket now is recognised and they're playing, cricket is fantastic, international level. But you can't beat a test match or even a county match for a proper game of cricket. It's an old-fashioned view, I know.
No, it's interesting to know, because I guess the desire for 2020 and stuff like that, and is it the 100 they call it?
Yes.
I'm crap at cricket knowledge, as we've spoken about, is that I guess the idea is that it gets more people into going to cricket, watching cricket, and then potentially watching the test matches and stuff like that, and taking part.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I guess it's an attempt at the gateway drug without having somebody to, especially in this day and age. You wonder how short the format could get. A TikTok cricket championship.
5 overs each or whatever.
You spend more time travelling to the venue than playing in it.
Exactly.
Back onto the comedy stuff.
Yeah.
If you were to become super famous, and you've got your Netflix special, your live at the Apollo set coming out, and you get to pick the music you walk on the stage to, what do you pick?
Well, this might get you, but have you heard of the Muffs?
No.
1980s, 90s punk American band.
No.
Right. The Muffs, Muffs.
Yeah.
And their song Become Undone. It's work of genius.
Become Undone. So it's proper punk type music?
It's more rock punk than just punk.
Okay. And how do you think that sets up? Why would you pick that? Is it setting up?
It's kind of an addictive melody. It's a great tune. and it would really put me in the mood to do a great set.
Okay, I guess it would also have the twist on the audience. So you're about to walk on, this rock/punk music is playing, and then on you walk.
Yeah,
like,
70
hello?
years old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, what the
With
hell?
a Zimmer frame. Yeah.
Reminds me of the time Kurt Cobain came at Reading in a wheelchair.
Oh, well, what's his name's done that as well? The guy who was born in Ipswich and now lives in Seattle, Barnes Courtney. Very good indie.
Okay. Well, one other thing is, with this open mic circuit then, what's the one thing you'd like to see change?
Yeah, this is, for me, a very important point. There's a load of gigs, and again, thanks to Jack Annison for writing every single gig in London. He's got a freebie for all the comedians,
Right.
Which is great. But the problem with the circuit is there isn't an in-between step up, because what we need are, say you've done 50 gigs, you're doing well, you should then be at a gig paid 20, 30 quid for 7 minutes. And there's kind of stuff like that, but certainly not enough. And that I tried with Alex Hawley. Do you know him, the Kiwi tall guy, brilliant comedian? We tried doing it, but it's so hard selling tickets because if you're paying someone 20 quid and you've got 6 people, you're already 120 quid down.
Yeah.
So you've got to sell tickets. I think that's what's lacking on the circuit, and I think it's really important that somebody does it.
Yeah.
And does it well. You only need 5 or 6 people and an MC.
Yeah.
Just to give them the feel of what it's like to be paid. It's a different vibe.
Yeah. So have you been at the stage where you've been paid for gigs and stuff like that?
I'm going to tell you a really interesting story now, which I think will interest everyone watching. I've done about 250 gigs, something like that. It might be nearer to 200, it might be nearer to 300, I don't know. And I might have been paid total £200 over 8 years. You get a tenner here, fiver there. I once got 30. Great. Okay, fine. Who cares? And of course, by the time you've added up how much money you've put in the tins, and I do believe, by the way, that everybody should put something in because you are renting time to practice your skill.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But a year ago, something extraordinary happened to me. I just happened to see, it was almost like it wasn't an advert, it was a posting in one of the comedy forums from an American guy. And he said, I'm setting up, I'm a businessman, Chicago, Illinois, all that. And I'm looking for people who can write jokes. I'm setting up a T-shirt printing business.
Okay.
So I contacted him. I mean, I'd been stung a few months earlier by a ventriloquist from South Dakota who took 5 jokes. I did 5 jokes for her. And she took them and she never paid me. But okay, fine, that's life. I won't lose any sleep over this. But I can tell you, in the year I've been working with this guy, just writing jokes, I brought a little team together of people, and a couple of people I knew from America.
Yeah.
A couple here, blah, blah, blah. And I've managed to monetize whatever skill I have in writing jokes and coming up with joke ideas. And he's given me quite a bit of copywriting and editing to do because I do that in my day job anyway. So for me, it's important, not because I've actually made the money, but because it shows you can monetize it. You don't have to be on stage to monetize it. That's the point.
Okay. That's a curveball. It's a googly.
It's extraordinary, really, because he's paying per joke.
Yeah.
And he wants more and more. So I've had to learn American English, of course.
It must be difficult.
It's really difficult. I mean, they don't have the word queue, stand in line. What the hell does that mean?
So those jokes get, then the idea is they get printed onto T-shirts and other stuff.
The concept is then sent to the design team.
Yeah.
So I'll give you an example. He wants lots of stuff on Trump. Obviously, Trump divides the room. So I came up with the idea of Mount Rushmore and all of the faces of Trump. with the line "Scott on the rocks." So he bought it. What do I care? I mean,
That's it. That's impressive.
I actually did a set telling everyone about this because I think, there's some great talented people out there, not necessarily are going to make it on the circuit live at the Apollo,
yeah.
but you never know what you might be able to do. You can write speeches for people and.
Yeah. I wasn't expecting that today.
No, well, it's been a good year. Mind you, to be honest, I mean, it's an enormous amount of work. I mean, he pays me, for doing the descriptors for the SEO and that kind of thing, and that's just small amounts. But there's a lot of small amounts, so it's been great.
Oh, cool.
I mean, he might finish tomorrow. You never know, but so far so good.
Yeah, make hay while the sun shines, as they say.
Exactly. The other thing about the circuit, which I think is very important, I've tried to do this. I think we should be helping each other free of charge, and I've done this with a couple of comedians, and just help them tidy up a bit their act. It's not about direction; it's more about content. And so people, how much? So you give a couple of hours of your time to someone to get better, and I think there should be more of that.
Yeah.
Without payment. There's no need for payment.
No,
I have to say that the promoters, we know all the big promoters, that on the open mic, there's Carl Wallace, Alfie Noakes, Gary Michaels, Irish guy, and now Richard, of course, and these guys are absolutely brilliant at helping and mentoring. And I've learned an enormous amount. I mean, Carl Wallace's course, everything except the gag, I think it's a must-do course. You learn everything, and Alfie sat down with me and really helped me. It's great. That's what they need that on the circuit. People say, "Look, I'm having a problem. Can anyone help me?"
No, I completely agree. I've had people direct me as such and tell me that don't do this, don't do that on stage. You do this. I don't know if you realise you do it, but don't. Walking backwards and stuff like that, and not allowing a joke to breathe and things like that. And you don't understand all of this stuff until you're actually involved in the industry and how something so simple can affect everything that you do.
Yeah. And the other thing I'd like to say is I love it when people I gig with make it. I absolutely love it.
Yeah.
And I've people have said, "Oh, why haven't you got an agent?" Well, okay, fine, I haven't got an agent. And if people have, I'm delighted for them.
Yeah.
And because there's not many of us can make it that far. So good luck, and I think it's fantastic. People have gone on to do brilliantly.
Yeah, I don't. Well, from my point of view, anyway, it sounds like you're very similar. I don't think there's any jealousy with other people. You can be envious of somebody, but you can be envious without hating someone.
Yes, indeed, that's right, and it's great to see people doing so well. I mean, Sadia Asmat, one of the early people who really made it big, and I knew from the beginning when I saw her that she was absolutely terrific, naturally funny. And I was so happy when she got an agent and she got signed up, and it's wonderful.
Yeah. Oh, completely agree. This bit's right up your street. Then, the section I'm going to talk about now is, as we're winding down, is I like to set. If it's the first time anyone's heard this, is that I like to set the comedians all a challenge.
Okay.
And that's to tell a joke on stage. But the joke comes from this joke book called The Little Book of Shit Jokes by Sid Finch. All the comedians get to do is I want them to pick a joke from the book, tell it live on stage, film it, put it on Instagram, tag us in it, add us as a collaborator, and we can all see the efforts and how you've done it. You can read the joke as if verbatim, or you can change it, whatever you want to do, as long as the premise stays the same. But the trick is that you don't get to pick the joke by words, you get to pick it by page number. So what you're going to get and what, I have no idea. I haven't memorized all of the jokes on this book, so I have no idea what you're going to get. So if you want to take up this challenge, I'm sure you do, because these jokes are right up your street.
Yeah, no, I've never heard of that one, funnily enough.
If you give me a number between 5 and 95, but if you do pick one that's already been selected, we go again.
Okay.
Keep going.
16.
Let's hope this is a short one for you.
Okay.
Okay, you've got 2 jokes on this page. You can have joke 1 or joke 2.
I'll have joke 2.
Joke 2. Okay, I'll send you a picture of the joke so you can do it whenever. But the joke I'd like you to tell on stage is, I forgot which way I threw my boomerang, but then it came back to me.
That's the Stuart Francis joke. What do you want me to do with this?
Tell it live on stage and film it, and then just post it on Instagram. You can say how you've done it, why you've done it, as part of this Open Mic Comedy Podcast Challenge. There are some examples on our webpage, on our Instagram page already, of people doing it.
And so you want it word for word the same?
If you want to change any words in it, as long as the premise is the boomerang, it comes back. And it's interesting to me how, I guess for one-liners and pun jokes are quite easy to get in because they can just sit in anywhere. But for somebody who writes a story, trying to get that into a story is a lot more challenging. And it's quite interesting.
Well, I accept the challenge.
Good. But no, so where can people find you then? What's your details and stuff?
Email, pretty simple, Rivlin Mark, one word, at gmail.com.
Yeah.
And then Instagram, Rivlin Mark, Twitter, MR_punman.
Okay.
I don't know if people still use Facebook, it seems.
I don't know about that.
Yeah.
But Instagram is the main bit, but you've got his email address if you want to get hold of him for any bookings and stuff.
Yeah, I'm always happy to take bookings, yes.
And what's the webpage for your book?
Yes, Secret Umps, secretumps.co.uk. You get a free chapter if you go to the website. I'm all heart. And the best page on it is how to buy this book. But I'm not expecting to make what I've paid, but I don't really care. If people who read it like it.
That's great.
That's all that matters to me.
Excellent stuff. I'll put links in the description of this podcast
that's great.
Anyway, so people can just click them and go there. Lastly, we are on Instagram at Open Mic Comedy Pod. We're on the W's at openmiccomedypod.com. Thank you for listening today. Whichever platform you're on, please go up and hit the number of stars, preferably 5. Add a little review if you so wish, if you have the ability to. It'd be really good to get the numbers up for people to hear these wonderful people I'm speaking to. And yeah, until next time, thank you for your time today, Mark.
Thank you for inviting me. It's been great.
No problem. And for everyone else, I'll speak to you all again very soon.